Hi, boys and girls. This week we are going to be reading a story called Helen Keller. Now, this story is a biography. A biography is a book written about a real person. So this is a nonfiction story about Helen Keller. When Helen Keller was a young child, she got a terrible fever and became deaf and blind. Her teacher, Anne Sullivan, taught her to communicate with her fingers. We're going to take a look inside the book. And here is a feature of nonfiction, and that feature is the table of contents. Here we're going to see different chapter titles and what pages we will see those chapters on. So if I didn't want to read the whole story and I just wanted to learn about her teacher, I would turn right to page 12 and start reading. Nonfiction stories are pretty nice in the way that you don't really have to read them from front to back like you do a fiction story. Okay? If you skipped around in a fiction story, it wouldn't make sense. But you can kind of do that a little bit in a nonfiction story, because each chapter is going to talk about a different part of Helen Keller's life. So if you only wanted to read about her teacher, you would go there. If you wanted to read about how she learns, you would go to the chapter called Helen Learns. Okay? But today we're going to read the whole story. So let's turn the page again. All right, another nice feature of nonfiction is the headings. Here's our first heading, Baby Helen. So we're going to be reading about Helen as a baby on these pages. Nonfiction stories also have many photographs in them instead of drawn pictures. Along with the photograph, you always have, or not always, but most of the time, this right here, it's called a caption, okay? And it tells you about the picture. This caption says, Ivy Green, the birthplace of Helen Keller in Tuscumbia, Alabama. So you see Ivy Green here, the birthplace. A long time ago, people used to name their houses, especially in the South. So the name of this house is called Ivy Green, and that's where Helen was born. And that is in the city of Tuscumbia and the state of Alabama. Can you find the word Alabama on this page? There it is. There's Alabama. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Oh, gotta get my cursor, sorry. Moving on. Here we go. All right. Here we are going to read a little bit more about Helen as a baby. Okay, and now we have a new heading. It's called A New World. Something has happened with Helen where things are new to her. Let's see. This is where we're going to start reading about where she couldn't see anything, where she became both blind and deaf. Can you find the word communicate? This is another feature of nonfiction. Communicate is a bold word. Okay. Communicate means to be able to exchange ideas with someone. Okay, whether that be through talking, like we do every day. Some people who can't talk, a lot of people that are deaf can't talk, find other ways to communicate, whether that be using their hands and making signs or pointing to things. Animals communicate with us by making their animal noises. So just communicate means a way to get your ideas across to other people. Okay? I'm going to show you a part of this word communicate. Let me erase my line there. Okay? Let's take a look at this ending word, or ending part. Looky there. I see the short word ate. That's a chunk of a word that you're going to see in many other words. So every time you see ATE, you're going to say ate. All right, let's move on. On page 9, we read that Helen is getting frustrated because she can't talk and she can't communicate with people. Can you find that word frustrated on page 9? There it is, frustrated. Now, on the last page, I showed you that part 8. Can you find 8 in frustrated? There it is, 8. Frustrated. Okay? That's an emotion that Helen feels. She's kind of upset and angry that she can't talk like other people can, and she can't communicate her feelings and her ideas. And that makes her very frustrated. I think that would be something hard to deal with, especially for a little girl. And here we meet someone who's going to help her. Her teacher, Anne Sullivan. We see that in the picture, and the caption tells us about Anne Sullivan. It says, Helen with her teacher, Anne Sullivan, in 1893. Okay, so we see Helen here as a girl, and here's her teacher. So Anne Sullivan came along, and I think she's going to make things a little easier for Helen. And this chapter is going to talk about her teacher and what her teacher did to help her. One of the ways that Helen learns to read is with a system called Braille. Can you find that word Braille? It's a bold word, so we know it's important. Right here's Braille. Okay, Braille is a way to write words so that people who are blind can see, and they read with their fingers. And they're able to do that because it is a system of raised dots. Okay, right there, raised dots. And so Helen can run her finger along those raised dots and feel the words she is reading. Okay, all right. Couple more pages to go through. All right. So Helen kept learning and learning and learning, and here we see a picture of her graduating from college. Okay, and she went on after she graduated from college to help other people. And it says especially blind and deaf people. She wanted to help them. Can you find the word especially? Right here is especially. Do you see the word special in the middle? Okay, so that's a good way to break that word. And then we see the ending ly that says ly on the end. And then we just put the E on the beginning. Especially. Say that with me. Especially. Okay, that means those were the kinds of people that she really, really, really wanted to help. She knew how it felt to be frustrated and not be able to communicate with others, or to talk with other people, or to learn to read and write. So she traveled around the world and she helped many people who were blind or deaf, or blind and deaf, just like her. All right, and finally, here we are at the end, and another feature of nonfiction that we see is a glossary and an index. A glossary tells us the meaning of words. We saw the word braille, communicate, fever, and raised in our story, and they were bold words. That means we can go back to the glossary to read the definition of these words so we know what those words mean. An index just tells us where we can find certain words to read about in the story. So if I wanted to read about Anne Sullivan, I see her name is on page 11 and on page 18. I would maybe go to those pages if I wanted to read just about Anne Sullivan. If I wanted to read about Braille, I might go to page 16. Okay? But the index tells us where we can find certain words, important words in the story. All right, boys and girls, you're going to read this story today. When you're finished reading it, you can mark it as read, and you need to mark it as a favorite. When you have finished, you need to go back to Canvas, and there is a quiz for you to take about Helen Keller. Happy reading today, boys and girls.